aspect. Another aspect can be called like the Dhamma in terms of encouragement. So it's like giving us encouragement to actually practice, to actually do what needs to be done. And that's actually a very, very important aspect. That's also an aspect of why coming together as a group, as a Buddhist group, Buddhist association, or what we call Sangha, it's both sharing ideas and views and values together, but also it's like encouragement, because as one person it's difficult to apply oneself and maybe go against the grain of either being lazy, procrastinating, or maybe always turning towards other kinds of activities and other kinds of could be pursuits or pleasures and so forth. So the idea of forming a group and coming together as a group is extremely helpful for feeling like motivation, encouragement in the Dhamma. One can say that sometimes being born and living in an environment that is fairly comfortable can be an obstacle, because we are just like comfortable. We feel good, we feel sabai, as they say in Thailand, and maybe we don't have to struggle too much for livelihood and for having good conditions, and then we may be not so urgent about spiritual practice, spiritual development, also maybe about worldly matters, kind of if it's just easy, and but then we can say, okay, it may be indeed fairly comfortable and easy, but then what to do further with one's life, then the Dhamma can be very relevant. And so when the Buddha gives so one way to approach it is considering the opportunity of being born as a human, and considering what's the significance or what's the value of this life. And one can reflect on it in many different ways. So, for example, we can say, suppose that we have already a fairly comfortable and fortunate kind of life, then if we just live it in a more selfish way, not wanting to do, too much, enjoying one's comforts and so forth, then if we look at it more closely, then maybe it feels actually not so beautiful, not so inspiring, not so noble kind of life. And by looking at that in that way, we may generate some wish to do something more with one's life, both for one's own benefit in terms of character and in terms of fulfillment in one's life, and also considering others, because maybe we are fairly comfortable and fortunate, but there are many others that are not so much. Also, if we look more closely into oneself, then we may have like some comfortable conditions and even some kind of a nice character or something like that. But if we look more closely, we may still see some deficiencies in within oneself, and these deficiencies means that with the changing of conditions, also we may actually experience quite a bit of suffering, some kind of dukkha, some kind of suffering, and actually our well-being is depending on good conditions that are being right now. But there can be some changes in one's health, can be some changes in the economy, there can be some changes in social conditions, let's say social harmony can turn into social turmoil, there can be changes in climate, these days is a big topic, and then what are we going to do if there will be some difficulties coming up, if we don't develop ourselves spiritually, or we can call it, give it different names on a spiritual path, on the path of a human quality, human strength, human intelligence, human tolerance, human endurance, the various qualities, then we may find ourselves one day falling into quite a bit of discomfort, quite a bit of dukkha. So that is a way of considering things and not being how we call it, forgot the name, but we can call it, like taking things easy and procrastinating and leaving things for another time. You see, I talked Hebrew for 2 months, so I have the word in Hebrew, but not in English. How it's called? Yeah. Of course, further than that, if we take on the study and the perspective and the consideration of what is called the round of birth and death, samsara, then this is an important aspect of feeling urgent about the Dhamma, about the path, because whatever degree of well-being and good fortune that we have right now, then of course we are heading towards the old age and sickness and possibility of many kinds of various kinds of difficulty. But even if this lifetime is kind of okay, good in some ways, and then considering the round of wandering on in being born, living, aging, dying, on and on and on, then that's even much more of a encouragement and a sense of importance and urgency to not just get by as we are, because there are many opportunities in this samsara to actually experience quite a lot of dukkha, suffering, and even somebody who is at the moment committed to doing good, to avoiding serious kind of unwholesome actions, keeping what we call sila, the standards of good conduct, still both because of a past karma that we don't know what we've been accumulating, and also the possibility of future conditions where we will not be able to understand, to distinguish between good and bad, and maybe we will have experienced some bad influence, then things can go quite into unfortunate conditions. And if we develop more of that perception of the uncertainty within the world, within the existence and the conditions of existence, and the ups and downs and the impermanence of good conditions, of good comforts and good fortune, and also the need to keep on obtaining good actions, good conditions for experiencing the results of these actions, then we may have more of a determination and urgency both on the side of keep on accumulating what we call kusala dhammas, skillful actions and wholesome actions, wholesome deeds and wholesome qualities. And even further than that, we will be more determined to follow the noble path, the path that is on the way of liberation from the round of birth, aging, sickness, death, another birth, another aging, another death, and so forth. So these kind of reflections, the Buddha is giving these teachings and these reflections so that we have the picture and we can motivate ourselves. And then it's indeed up to us, whatever we would like to choose, whatever we are able to do, whatever we have the motivation, the determination, then we will do that much. But even the sense of motivation can be developed. So we begin with a little bit. So we are interested to hear some teachings, to reflect on them, maybe to begin to practice more circumspection about our actions, and practice mindfulness, practice meditation, and then by doing that we begin to develop more commitment and more determination to practice more, to be more diligent about these matters, to give them more importance. And so gradually we have we develop a life that is and that does have the intention, the motivation as a strong base. So we don't want to waste time, we don't want to procrastinate, to say, yeah, later when we finish this and finish that, when whatever some people think, when we get old, when we've done all the family work and career and this and that and a beautiful house, and then we will consider some spiritual matters. But that's not the advice of the Buddha and the wise people. So as soon as we see we understand something of the importance and the value of it, then it's good to begin to take it, to bring it into our life, and do whatever we can do, and adjust our life, adjust our schedule, and see how we don't waste time and rather use time as skillfully and as beneficially as we can. And as saying yesterday, whatever we do, it needs the perspective of a gradual development. So we have to learn ourselves, learn our life, and then gradually make the changes and the developments that can be done. But to not delay in beginning doing that's important. So it can come from one side, the side of seeing the drawback or the wastefulness of living a life that is without Dhamma, or generally living as a lazy person, kind of taking things easy, and seeing the drawbacks of that. It makes one's character weak. It makes it is wasting of the potential that we have as a human being in general, as each individual with whatever potentials that we have and the talents that we can bring to fruition, like make use of them. So to see the drawbacks of not doing that, and the future dukkha or future waste when we look back at our life and seeing, oh yeah, nothing much was done and developed and fulfilled. The other way is considering I'm kind of mixing it together, considering the noble potential or the higher potential of us as a human being. So sometimes we can also relate it to taking the Buddha as inspiration, as a model. So the Buddha was not one who was lazy and procrastinating, but rather one who's been taking a determination. As we know, to become a Buddha, it takes many lifetimes, not just kind of a small project. And taking a determination and commitment and fulfilling it through a long journey of being true and being committed to what one took on. And also the Buddha's example is the example of one's own benefit and the benefit of others. And if we talk about a Buddha, then indeed it's a very rare individual that arises in the world once in a human's age, or even not every time, and this kind of more of a cosmic ideas that we can take as maybe some theory of understanding things. But as for looking more realistically about ourselves, we can say the Buddha is an example of a fulfillment of one's potential and fulfillment on a noble path, not just an ordinary path of a human being doing what kind of ordinary things, worldly aims and values, but taking a higher aims and values and really dedicating oneself to it. So hopefully we can find inspiration, and we can develop more inspiration and more motivation to follow noble examples and not just follow a kind of a mediocre life. Of course, it's not only the Buddha. We can take many kinds of examples. If we mention Ajahn Chah as a example in the last century of the Buddhist world, and one who is important in this particular community and tradition. But we can take many examples, whether within the Buddhist world or outside of the Buddhist world, people who did or are in the present dedicating themselves for higher aims and values and higher development as a human being. So with the Dhamma perspective, we want to be careful about trying to do a lot of good in the world without also the side of the more introspective side, or the side of learning about oneself and developing one's inner qualities and inner purity. So we don't get too much into doing good, but actually oneself, within oneself, is not yet so good actually, and we end up maybe not so good, if we put it simply, and also possibly kind of losing track or not being able to see clearly what will be of benefit and value. So we want to have as a base training oneself, studying oneself, and purifying one's heart, as is one of the summaries of the Buddha's teaching, and then together with that, contributing something of value to the world in general. Maybe can mention another aspect of gratitude. Whatever good conditions that we may experience in our life is not only our own achievement. Surely it is not only our own achievement. We are relying on so many benefits that come from others. most basically our parents, that in most cases we were depending on our parents for many years to be brought up and come into this world, and then many other people that we were benefiting from, whether friends, teachers, and many kinds of things in terms of knowledge, in terms of supports in life, that we are depending on so many others. So if we are just taking it easy and for granted, without considering that we should also be people, humans that contribute something, then this will be a approach that brings misfortune for oneself and for the society in general. But as long as humans we see that we are actually helping each other, this is the way of living. Everyone needs to be to take on some kind of tasks and skills to contribute to the world, and that's how the human world can be a world of prosperity. But if we just like somehow taking our own advantage and without much of considering our contribution, this is actually neither inspiring nor appropriate way of living, and one time or another it will come back on us. As like as we know, karma, the way we live, the way we act, is what determines the essence of what we get back. So if at the moment we are receiving quite a good conditions and good circumstances in life, then it must be that we've been doing something good in the past, and but we have to consider also the present, which is the conditions for future. Another aspect of procrastination is likes and dislikes. Yeah, what we like to do, we tend to be easily doing it. And what we don't like, we find excuses to not do it or leave it for later. And so it's a very interesting area of contemplation and study. Because in one way it is natural, we have likes and dislikes, but if we're going to grow on the path, on the noble path, on the path of Dhamma, on the path of a human being who is developing and not just a follower of whims and wishes and likes and dislikes, then this area is a very, very valuable to look at. And there's one place where the Buddha is distinguishing between the wise and the fool. Sometimes the Buddha is using these. So we can say the fool is one who is following. What is pleasant and what is according to one's likes. So if it is according to that, then he will do that. He will apply himself to that. And then what then what is not agreeable. What is within one's dislikes, and then this will determine the actions of a fool, while the actions of the wise will be determined by truly considering the benefit of the matter. And then even if something is not so pleasant to do and to apply oneself to, still the wise will be able to follow that, to take on that action, that task. And even some things that are pleasurable, the wise will consider it as not beneficial and will be able to put it down, not to follow that. So that's a very useful things to consider. And even from childhood, we begin to understand that some things we need to do even if we don't like them. Yeah, I remember as a child I didn't like to bathe. Yeah, I didn't like it. But then whether my mother, my father, they were saying, no, you should do it. They were asking, did you do it already? And okay, yeah, you have to do it, because if you don't do it, then you get smelly and dirty. And so we learned that, yes, some duties are duties and we need to do them. And we can even develop some liking to things that we don't like. And we can develop particular liking and appreciation to do things that are of benefit. So we can say a childish approach is just following what is pleasant, what you like, and growing as an adult or a wise human being is more like following things according to a more mature perspective. And so one can add to it that the satisfaction of doing things that are of benefit and things that we should do that are within our responsibility, and this kind of satisfaction is different from just following pleasure. Yeah, what is pleasing to us. And this is also an interesting area of what is a sense of well-being, what kind of happiness one is looking for. So there are more like temporary and kind of superficial kind of pleasures and comforts, and we can live by them, and that will be indeed more like a child. And we can develop ourselves in a way that we are able to have more patient endurance and determination to do things in a way that is not just according to pleasure and displeasure, but then the satisfaction that comes from that and the strength of mind that can dwell above likes and dislikes. So one can say the highest attainments on the path, indeed, one's mind is above pleasure and pain and likes and dislikes. But to begin to go on to work on that path, it can be with small matters where we can follow tasks and take on things to do and habits and so forth, because we see the benefit of it, and we can feel satisfied actually when we are able to follow such things, and not just being a very kind of a weak character, that anything that is a bit outside of the comfort zone and one's preferences, then we cannot actually follow that. And one can see it in pretty much every area in one's life, whether the habits of resting, we're just resting according to as comfortable, as lazy, as easy as possible, or we are able to just rest enough to then apply ourselves to good works, and our attitude towards food and diet and eating and drinking also can be very childish. It's just what we like, just what we prefer, or we can do it with some wiser kind of a reflection, consideration. And many kinds of matters like that, they are the things that will build up a character of somebody who has a ability to grow, and not to stay like a little baby who is always screaming when something is not agreeable. Yeah. So more could be said about it, but I think it's enough for we are approaching 11 o'clock.